So, hello then, welcome back to yet another Night of the Movies podcast. I'm Spike Knight, and in these podcasts I like talking all things movies and TV, and whatever I want, whenever I want. And in today's podcast, I'm continuing on with my Harry Potter film reviews with my review of Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, the third film in the Harry Potter film series. But just before I do that, I should say what I say at the start of every podcast I do, which is, if you are watching this podcast on YouTube, hello to my viewers, but prefer to listen to your podcast on Spotify, well, even look, as you can also listen to this podcast on Spotify. That's Night of the Movies on that platform. And if you are already listening to this podcast on Spotify, hello there to podcast listeners, then you can also check this podcast out visually. Yes, you can watch this podcast on my YouTube channel at Night of the Movies on that platform as well. Likewise, whatever you may be watching or listening to this podcast, don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoy the podcast, of course, and please leave me with some feedback on things to improve on in future podcasts, because there are always things to improve on, and feedback is, as ever, much appreciated. So, let's get into it, shall we? Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. So, as already mentioned, this is the third film in the Harry Potter film series, and the first film in the Harry Potter film series not to be directed by Chris Columbus. The first film to be directed by someone different, because Chris Columbus, who is most well known for directing Home Alone 1 and 2, Mrs. Doubtfire, and the first two Harry Potter films, did not return to direct the third Harry Potter movie. He is still attached as an executive producer, but instead, Alfonso Cuarón, apologies if I mispronounced his name there, although I'm pretty sure I got his name pronunciation correct, but apologies if I didn't. Alfonso Cuarón, who is probably most well known for directing films like Gravity, Children of Men, Roma, directed this film. He directed the third Harry Potter film. And I should say, what I say at the start of all my Harry Potter film reviews, I should reiterate what I always say, and that is I haven't read the books that these films are based on. So sorry if I get some details incorrect. And also, I'm reviewing these films right now because it's like I'm watching them for the first time. I mean, I'm not watching them for the first time because I have seen these films yonks ago, and I mean yonks ago. I barely remember anything about them, but that's why I'm saying it's like I'm watching for the first time, because I really don't remember anything, so it feels as if I am, and that's why I'm giving my thoughts about these films on this channel at the moment. So, I was excited to see this film. I was excited quite a bit, actually, because if you watched my review or listened to my review of Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets, you'll know that I was actually quite a fan of that film. I mean, I was about to say I was quite a big fan. I wouldn't say I was a big fan of Chamber of Secrets, but I enjoyed it a lot more than its predecessor. I enjoyed it a lot more than Philosopher's Stone because it was more livelier, had a darker edge to it, and it was wildly entertaining in my opinion. And that got me excited to see where the story was going, because this film came out in 2004, 2 years after Chamber of Secrets, so I knew the kids were going to be more older in this film. And I was also excited to watch this film because, as I already mentioned, it's the first Harry Potter film not to be directed by Chris Columbus. And I'm not a big fan of Chris Columbus as a filmmaker. I think he did a fine job directing the first two Harry Potter films. I don't think he did a bad job. I think he did a much better job directing Chamber of Secrets and Philosopher's Stone. But I still don't think he's a great director. And I wanted to see someone like Alfonso Cuarón, who did direct the third Harry Potter movie, to come in and tell and direct his version of a Harry Potter film, because Chris Columbus, although he's a fine filmmaker, is not a visionary filmmaker. He's not a mature filmmaker. And although I'm not overly familiar with Alfonso Cuarón's work, like I haven't seen Children of Men or Roma, I have seen Gravity, and I know that he is a visionary filmmaker. He's someone you can clearly tell has a vision for the stories he is telling, and he is one of those filmmakers you would call a mature filmmaker, you know, like Coppola or Scorsese, or more like Denis Villeneuve or something like that. Someone who you can tell has a certain style and has a vision with a film. And that was another reason I was excited to see it. So those two big reasons, you know, because I like Chamber of Secrets so much and because of Alfonso Cuarón directing this, were the two main reasons I was excited to see this film. And having watched it yesterday, here are my thoughts on it. Here share my thoughts on Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. I really enjoyed this film, and I enjoyed it because it felt like it had a vision behind it. It felt like it was actually from a director, and the directing was really special. It had this magic behind it, and the way the directing and the way the direction of this film was married up to the John Williams musical score, which was a step up from, John Williams musical score for Chamber of Secrets. And I'll get into the John Williams musical score in a lot more detail a lot later in this review, but the way the visuals and the direction marry up to the John Williams musical score, I really admired all the craft behind this film. The performances felt more real. I thought that the young actors, the main three stars of the film, Daniel Radcliffe, Emma Watson, and Rupert Grint. I remember what his name is now because I didn't remember when I did my review of Philosopher's Stone. The main three felt more real with their performances. Same with most of the cast, and the new additions. You got Gary Oldman as Sirius Black, Emma Thompson as one of the wizard teachers in this, one of the witches in Hogwarts. They were great. Also, David Thewlis as Lupin. I almost forgot his name there. David Thewlis as Lupin was also a great addition. And the supporting performances felt more real, like Alan Rickman as Snape. So much of this film felt more real, and again, you could tell it's from a visionary filmmaker, and that's something I really admire about it. The way Alfonso Cuarón directed this film with all this swooshing camera movement, the framing. I mean, I didn't love every single decision he made in the filmmaking, like certain decisions with the way he framed Hagrid to make Hagrid look bigger than some of the other characters I wasn't particularly fond of, but overall I thought this was a very well directed film, and that is the reason I enjoyed it. Because on the downside though, I did not love the feel of this film. It took a bit to adjust to, and it didn't quite have that same inviting feel of Philosopher's Stone and Chamber of Secrets. Like, I don't love those two films, but they have this inviting feel to them. They're family-friendly films. Whilst this film didn't feel as family-friendly, it felt more like you had to have watched the previous two Harry Potter movies to get this one. I don't really think that's the best thing to do with a franchise. I think the best franchise is you should be able to join in at any point. You should be able to watch the fourth or fifth or third film in a franchise, in this case, and not have to watch the previous two movies. Whilst this film, with the way it felt, it didn't have this inviting feel to it, and it felt like, as what I mentioned, you had to see the previous two Harry Potter movies to understand what was going on, and that you had to have also read the Harry Potter books to understand what was going on. Because one of my problems with this film is there's so much story going on in here. There's so much story and so much going on in the narrative that I didn't quite get my head around it, and I don't mind doing this, but I had to look up what the film was really about and what all the aspects of the story after I watched the film, whereas I didn't have to do that with the previous two Harry Potter movies. I felt like I had to have watched, or had to have read even, the Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban book to fully understand all the twists and the turns within the story. And even when I looked it up on the internet after, I went to go and ask my brother, who's a big Harry Potter fan, what happened in this film? Why was this happening? Why did this happen at this certain point? Can you explain this twist a bit more to me? Because I didn't totally get it. Because there's so much going on. And Alfonso Cuarón does a very good job at not making it feel messy. The story and the narrative of this film flows smoothly, but at the same, and it feels focused too, but at the same time, there is so much that I found it, and this might just be me, because I'm not a particularly smart person, and some films I find easier to follow than others, and this is probably, I do think this is a complex film. I do think this is, probably the most complex Harry Potter movie I've seen yet. And if I remember correctly, I don't think the other films get that complicated. And I did find parts of this film complicated, and I found it slightly hard to follow. Plus, this is this film introduces time travel, and I don't mind time travel in films or TV shows. One of my favourite TV shows to watch whenever I'm feeling down is Doctor Who, and that show is all about time travel. Some of my favourite films are time travel, you know, the Back to the Future trilogy. I love that trilogy. Yes, all three films I love to pieces. X-Men Days of Future Past is one of my favourite superhero movies. That's all about time travel. Star Trek 2009, J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, the first of his Star Trek trilogy, has a time travel element in there. About Time, one of my favourite rom-coms that's come out over the past decades. 10 years old now, that film. That has a time travel plot point in it, which is vital to the whole point of that film. But I've also seen some films where time travel hasn't worked for me that much and has made me more confused. Films such as Tenet have done that with the time travel element, and this film has a time travel element to it in the later stages of it. And I didn't mind the time travel thing. I kind of liked the idea behind it, but it felt thrown in. And there was a certain point when I was watching this yesterday and rewatching it for the first time in what feels like a decade, and maybe over a decade, where there's a certain point in the film where Hermione is showing up to these lectures, and she's coming out of nowhere though, and then one makes a point to Harry about, oh, did you see her come in? Where the hell she come from? It's something like that. He says something like that in one of the scenes in the film, and as soon as Ron Weasley said that, as soon as Ron said that in the film, I was like, this film's got something to do with time travel. I remember it now. I remember this film has something to do with time travel. But it didn't explain the time travel element until later on. And by that point, it felt a bit like too much. The film felt a little too convoluted. It didn't feel convoluted, but it... Actually, no, that doesn't make sense. I just said that it felt a little too convoluted, but it didn't feel convoluted. No, it did feel convoluted. Because I would have minded if the time travel element was allured to, or was hinted at, or was explained early on in the film in some sort of way, and then you keep seeing hints at it throughout the film, and then it's fully explained in the final act of the film. But instead, it felt like the time travel aspect was thrown in the third act, and by that point I was like, what? We're doing this? We've already had quite a lot of twists. We're doing time travel as well. I'm not sure if it was needed, and that was a part of the film I didn't really like. I didn't really like how time travel was used in this film, and I'm really hoping it's not used in future Harry Potter films. I don't remember if it is. I really don't remember. I'm being completely honest when I say I barely remember anything about the next couple of Harry Potter movies other than Voldemort's death and there's a twist with Snape at some point. That's all I pretty much remember. And I'm really hoping time travel isn't used, because I didn't hate it in this film, but it was one of the weaker parts of it. If you introduced the time travel stuff early on, would have been fine about it. But they introduce it quite late on in the film to the point I was like, oh, it seems to be like a cop-out. It seems like you can't think of any other reason to get out of this sticky situation with the characters have found themselves in. Yeah, I didn't love the time travel element of this film. In addition, the CGI wasn't great either. I really liked the practical effects of Chamber of Secrets. I mean, there was some wobbly CGI here and there in Chamber of Secrets, but a lot of the effects with the creatures and the world of that film, particularly with the snake that Harry faced off in the third act of Chamber of Secrets, looked real. What's it called? The Balasic? I might have missed... I might have got the name of the snake wrong there, but it's called something like that, and that snake, the way it looks in Chamber of Secrets, is great. Here, I don't think any practical effects were used. I don't think any practical effects were used in Prison of Azkaban. I think it's mostly CGI, and because this film came out in 2004, it means that some of the CGI is dated, and it doesn't look great, and it looks like a CGI, it looks like the VFX out of a video game. The Hippogriff, which I think is a wonderful idea, and I like the scenes with Buckbeak the Hippogriff in this film, particularly when you see Harry flying for the first time early on in that John Williams musical score, you know, da 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 da. I'm singing it awfully there, but the way the John Williams musical score marries up to that scene where Harry rides a hippogriff for the first time is utterly delightful to watch. But the hippogriff never looked real. It looked like something out of a video game, and it did take me out of it. I thought the CGI looked dated, and it wasn't only the hippogriff, it was the werewolf as well. Like, spoiler here if you haven't seen this film, but this film been out, you know, for 20 years now. It's 20 years old this year. Lupin turns into a werewolf at one point in the film, and it didn't look real. I didn't believe in that, and I liked the werewolf scene. I liked the way it was shot with Lupin looking at the moon, and there's a zoom in into Lupin's eye. At least I think it's Lupin. I might be talking about the wrong character, but you know what I mean. David Lewis's character, there's a zoom in into his eye, and the way that scene is shot is like, oh wow, this is actually, you know, you can tell it's from a filmmaker, as I said before. But the CGI with the werewolf looked bad. And it made me long for the werewolf transformation in The Howling. The Howling is a terrible film, but it's got a superb and utterly memorable werewolf transformation scene. Same with American Werewolf in London, which has got a very memorable werewolf transformation scene. But this film, the werewolf transformation, I liked it at the start, but then when he turned to CGI, I was like, I don't believe that at all. I didn't like the effects in this film. I didn't quite feel the emotional stakes of this film. I didn't feel the emotional moments as much as I wanted to. There's this really great scene where Harry's talking to Sirius Black, you know, played by Gary Oldman, about how he wants Sirius Black to become his new carer so he doesn't have to go back to the Dudleys. But the scene doesn't really fit in with what's going on in that whole segment of the film, because we've just had all these reveals about who Lupin is in relation to Sirius Black and Peter Pettigrew, who I think is played by Timothy Spall. There's been all these twists and things. And then we get the scene between Sirius Black and Harry Potter, and it feels like it kind of comes out of nowhere. Well, not that it doesn't come out of nowhere, I take that back actually, but it doesn't really fit in with everything else going on. There's some pacing issues, and I didn't feel quite as emotionally connected to this film as I wanted to. And I don't think it has the same heart as the first two films. Again, going back onto that whole thing, it didn't feel quite as inviting as the first two movies. It didn't feel quite as warm as the first two movies because it didn't have that same heart. It didn't feel like the relationship between Harry, Hermione and Ron, which was at the centre of the previous two Harry Potter movies, was at the centre of this film. It felt like the whole stuff with Sirius Black escaping Azkaban and coming after Harry Potter, that was at the centre of this film. But I didn't like that as much. I felt that the friendship between the main three characters was more of a supporting plot point in this film, and again, I didn't love that. There were parts of the film which I really wanted to love, and I could see what they were going for, but I didn't love. And at certain points, it did feel like a little too much, like with the whole time travel. And there's this one scene where all these bombshells are thrown on you, and I'm like, whoa, 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 whoa! Can we just stop a sec and let this twist sink in, let this emotional moment sink in? Because I don't think you're letting it sink in. And there's so much story in this film. I didn't love it because it didn't quite have the same heart and wonder of the first two films. I'm not going to say I don't really like it, but I don't think the first Harry Potter movie is all that special. But it has a good heart, and it has some wonder in there when I look back at it, and Chamber of Secrets builds on that. Chamber of Secrets does have some wonder in there, but this film didn't have that wonder that I wanted to. It didn't feel quite as magical as I hoped it would. Although it did feel magical though. I'm not saying it didn't feel magical at all. It just wasn't as magical as I hoped it would feel. And there was magic in the directing, as what I mentioned. So many memorable sequences. The night bus sequence. I loved that. In fact, I I wish that night bus sequence went on for 10 minutes longer. I understand why it was the length it was, but I wish it went on for longer. And as I've already briefly spoken about, the sequence where Harry rides the hippogriff for the first time. Wonderful to watch. There were so many scenes like that in the film. The way he directs the Quidditch sequence as well. I couldn't tell what was CGI there and what wasn't. That is actually one of the parts of the film where I was really impressed by how Alfonso Cuarón switched between CGI and the real actors. I couldn't tell where it was happening, and I mean that in the best way. That Quidditch sequence, I wish went on for so much longer, because I think it's the best directed Quidditch sequence in all the Harry Potter movies thus far. So yeah, I really liked the direction, and that's the thing which elevated this film for me, because the way he uses camera angles, how he introduced Dumbledore as well. Dumbledore, sadly not played by Richard Harris in the film, because I think Richard Harris had passed away, and I think Richard Harris was just brilliant as Dumbledore in the first two Harry Potter movies, and now the late great Michael Gambon plays Dumbledore from this film onwards. And the way he introduces Dumbledore, you see the Hogwarts choir singing Double Trouble, then the camera tracks up through the Hogwarts choir as they split apart, and Michael Gambon as Dumbledore is revealed, and I really like Michael Gambon's performance as Dumbledore in this film. I think he did a good job playing that character. I didn't quite love him as much as I loved Richard Harris in his first appearance in Philosopher's Stone, but I think Michael Gambon did a very good job. I'm looking forward to seeing more of him as Dumbledore. I've spoken to some people I know who do not really like Michael Gambon as Dumbledore. I don't totally get that myself, but yeah, I think he did a good job. Right, so this is an add-on. One thing I wanted to mention, but I almost forgot to mention. Well, I did forget to mention when I was recording the podcast first time around, but I remembered to mention as soon as I finish recording the podcast. So this is me from beyond the podcast, and that is this. The Dementors in this film. This is the first time we've seen the Dementors in the Harry Potter movies. I do remember that they come back later on, but every single time the Dementors were on screen or mentioned, all I was thinking about was The Office, the US version of The Office, where Michael Scott is doing Prison Mike in one of the episodes. I think it's in season 2 of The Office, or it might be season 3. And he goes, he's talking about his time in Prison Mike is, and he says, and what was really tough was the Dementors. And it's one of the funniest moments in the US version of The Office. And it ruined the Dementors for me in this film, because every time they came on screen, I'm like, Prison Mike is faced off against them. That's all I was thinking whenever the Dementors came on screen. Although I did like the way visually they looked. That was actually one of the biggest that was actually one of the best parts in terms of the VFX for this film, because they looked far better than the Hippogriff looked. Yeah. Anyway, that was just something I wanted to mention, but forgot to mention when I was actually recording this podcast. Back to the podcast and me rambling on about this film. And of course, we have to talk about the John Williams musical score. John Williams, I spoke about at length in my review of Chamber of Secrets and in my review of Philosopher's Stone. I love his score for Philosopher's Stone far more than I actually liked that film. And I did not love his score for Chamber of Secrets, though. I still thought it was very good. There were some very good new themes in Chamber of Secrets, but John Williams couldn't put his full heart and effort into the score for that film, because he was also composing 4 other movie scores at the same time. And here, in 2004, when he did the score for Prisoner of Azkaban, he didn't really have... I don't think he was scoring anything else at the same time. He might have been scoring Steven Spielberg's The Terminal around the same time, but he wasn't scoring nearly as much as he was back in 2002. And you can tell, because again, even though I like the score for Chamber of Secrets quite a bit, and I have listened to it quite a lot from time to time, his score for Prisoner of Azkaban is far superior. Is it far superior? I'd say it's just superior, actually. I don't know if far superior is the right way of putting it, but it is a superior score. You can tell that John Williams has put so much time and effort into the score, and there's so many memorable themes. This music that plays, that when the first time Harry rides the Hippogriff for the first time, one of the best pieces of John Williams music I have ever heard. And I listen to John Williams daily. I listen to his music all the time. I love all of his Star Wars scores, all of his Indiana Jones scores, his first 2 Jurassic Park scores. I love so much of John Williams' music. And I do genuinely think that the theme that plays when Harry rides a hypocrite for the first time is one of the most uplifting and enchanting pieces of music I have ever heard. Genuinely perfection, that piece of music. And I mean, there's not only that, the music that plays during the Quidditch game, you know, boom 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 boom. I've had that piece of music stuck in my head since I saw the film yesterday. I think I was even dreaming about that piece of music last night. That's why I decided to sing it there, to try and get it stuck out of my head, because that piece of music has been stuck in my head, but in the way you want it to be. It's a great piece of music. Also, the theme, A Window into the Past, and the music that plays during the night bus sequence. There's so many memorable parts. There's so many memorable parts of the musical score of this film. Double Trouble, Double Trouble. I can't sing it, but yeah, you get the point I'm making. John Williams did an absolutely masterful job with the musical score for this film, because he perfectly encapsulated the feel of this film. In the musical score. I may not love this film overall, but I love John Williams' musical score, and I love how it marries up to the visuals, because this film feels more mature in its atmosphere and in its setting and in its overall feel to the previous 2 films, and so does the John Williams musical score. You can really tell John Williams knew what sort of film Alfonso Cuarón was making, and it felt like there was, I don't know if this by any means, I haven't looked up online if this was the case, but it felt like there was a lot of collaboration, and a strong collaboration between John Williams and Alfonso Cuarón. I always feel it's like when John Williams works with an auteur filmmaker, whether it's a Spielberg or Lucas, so any other auteur filmmakers that he's worked with, who I'm just forgetting off the top of my head right now, not as far as I can think. Maybe, I suppose I could say J.J. Abrams or Rian Johnson as well, because he did obviously the music for the Star Wars sequels. Whenever he's working with a director who has a vision, you can tell that they can tell, because the John Williams musical score is just that little bit better. It is, if you listen, and I do think that this is actually his best Harry Potter musical score. That might be sacrilegious to say, because I know people love the score to Philosopher's Stone, and I do too. I've got the score back there. I've got the CD for the score back there, somewhere over there in the back of my room. But I do prefer the score for Prisoner of Azkaban, the way it was used, and yeah, I think it's John Williams' best Harry Potter musical score, and I'm so sad that he never composed another Harry Potter musical score. Because I don't know who did it after. I think it was James Newton Howard, if I'm correct there. I'm not sure entirely, but how could the Harry Potter producers let John Williams go? The next Harry Potter film came out in 2005, and if you look in 2005, John Williams composed the music to, Star Wars Episode 3, Revenge of the Sith. He also composed the music to Munich, the Spielberg film, another Spielberg film, War of the Worlds, and Memories of Geisha. He composed a lot of music in 2005. But I would have liked it if he composed the music to the next Harry Potter film, because he didn't, and I think it was a huge shame that they let him go. Especially after they did such a phenomenal job with the musical score to this film, because it really is something special. And what a musical score to go out on. I love the John Williams musical score to this film. However, I don't love the music. I don't love the music. I just said I love the music. I love the music, but I don't love the film overall. And I think in the end it comes down to this. I didn't love this film because it took a bit to adjust to. It's not got the same feel as the first 2 films, and for some people that might be a big plus, but after I sort of came to really like that feel in Chamber of Secrets, I was put off by the feel of this film for the first hour. And maybe on a rewatch I'll like this film a lot more. In fact, I can almost see that definitely happening. But also, I I don't know. I don't really know what I was about to say there, but I think it was just about adjusting to it, because it did not have the feel of the first two Harry Potter movies, and it was darker. I didn't love all the decisions which were made in terms of the story, and I would have liked there to be a lot more of Gary Oldman as Sirius Black. I understand why he's not introduced into the later stage of the film, but he's so good, and maybe he comes back in a later film. I don't know. Again, I don't remember. Maybe he comes back, but I would have liked there to be more of him, because I felt he was the most interesting character in the film, and we didn't get to see the most of him. Yeah, I liked the film. I enjoyed it because it felt like it was from a visionary filmmaker. It had a vision behind it, and the John Williams musical score brought that magic to the film, which I felt the story was lacking. And that is why I didn't totally love it, because it didn't have that same... It didn't feel as lively as Chamber of Secrets, and it didn't have that same magic, I didn't think the first two films were too magical, which is why I keep hesitating about saying magic, but they felt slightly more magical than this film now, at least for me. And that is why I am going to say that Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is I'm going to give it a 7.5 out of 10. I'm giving it the exact same rating I gave Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. Because I didn't love either of those films. I'm still yet to love a Harry Potter movie. I'm still yet to finish one of these Harry Potter movies on Netflix, which is where I watch them all, because they're all currently streaming on there. I'm still yet to finish one of these Harry Potter movies on Netflix and go, wow, what a film! I thought it was going to happen with this one. I really thought it was going to happen, because it's from Alfonso Cuarón, and I remember having that feeling when I watched Gravity for the first time. I haven't seen Gravity in yonks, kind of like Harry Potter. I think I watched Gravity around the same time I watched this film for the first time, actually. There was no correlation. I didn't even know it was from the same director. I just watched them around the same time. But I'm still yet to really get it, why people love this world, why people love the Harry Potter world, and why people love the Harry Potter film franchise so much. And I thought I was going to get it from this film, you know? And another point at that, I still don't quite understand the logistics of the Wizarding world and the world of Hogwarts in relation to the real world in these films, because we see the real world in the Dudleys, but then I'm not entirely sure where the real world ends and the Wizarding world begins. And how do they cross over? Do they go through a portal? Is the Wizarding world just there and we can't see it? I don't quite understand that, and I don't think any of these three films have done a good job of explaining it yet. I'm still yet to fully get my head around it, because I don't think any of the films have explained it particularly well. I don't know the logistics of the Wizarding world in these films. I just don't understand that yet, and I'm hoping that future movies, or the next movie even, explains the logistics of all that, because it might make me like these films a lot more, but I can understand the world, but I still don't quite understand the world. Where is Hogwarts? Are we meant to not know? I don't know. You know? Anyway, I enjoyed this film because of the way it was directed and because of the storytelling, but I didn't love the story, and I didn't feel it had the same heart the first two films, and it took a little to adjust to, and the CGI was a bit off-putting too. It did take me out of it, but it was very well directed, and the John Williams musical score, and I have said it's very well directed quite a few times, but I really want to reiterate that, because that's why I liked the film. That's why I actually enjoyed the film as much as I did. It was very well directed, and the John Williams musical score, perfection. John Williams does no wrong, you know? And, yeah. His best score again. The performances all felt more real, you know? I enjoyed this film. I just wish I loved it, though. And so, all in all, as I've already said, and as I'm going to say once more, Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban is a 7.5 out of 10 from me. Anyway guys, that's it for today's podcast. If you have seen Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, please let me know your thoughts on it in the comments section below. Maybe it's your favourite Harry Potter film, maybe it's your least favourite Harry Potter movie, or maybe you just think it's okay. Whatever your thoughts are on Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban, please let me know in the comments section below, and look forward to my review of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire. I'm actually kind of looking forward to watching that now. Surprisingly enough, I'm looking forward to watching each of these Harry Potter movies as I'm doing these reviews. So yes, look forward to my review of Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, the 4th Harry Potter movie, coming some point within the next week on this channel. But until then guys, thank you as always for watching, and if you haven't yet, please you click down below and like and subscribe on this podcast. I look forward to many more podcasts coming very, very soon on this channel. As I've already said, thank you as always for watching or listening to this podcast, and I will see you guys again soon, but bye for now. Bye.